Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome back to another AD&D review. This time, it's actually part 2 of the original Dungeon Master's Guide. When I first reviewed this, I sort of skimmed over the last part of the book, which is actually one of the most important parts of this book. Mind you, this book was put out... This one was, I believe, printed in 1979, and it's in a pretty decent shape. I've got a couple of these, and I need a couple more. So if you're, wanting to get rid of one, let me know. I'll give you a good price for it. Just kidding, folks. I think 3 is plenty. But the part I want to go over is the appendices. Starting on page 169, going all the way to, oh goodness, 225. So almost 50 pages worth of goodness. And Appendix A is the random dungeon generation section right here. As you see, it's got a couple of entrance ways for, good old-fashioned dungeons on grid paper, graph paper, whatever you guys want to call it. And it's got a ton of great tips and tables. While I'm not a big fan of random tables, a lot of people out there really love them. And it's got things for periodic checks, random noises, side passages, treasure, exits, random piles, occurrences of treasure. You just randomly find a bit of treasure. Treasure is guarded by, treasure is hidden in, stairs, tricks and traps, caves and caverns. Even a section here, random dungeon generation for solo play, which I actually used quite a bit just to test things out. And occasionally I would, try to, as a youngster, play, a group of characters and see if I could survive. Then we go into random wilderness terrain. For example, if you're want to do a hex crawl or something like that, you could just randomly determine what's there. Random monster encounters. Then random dungeon monster tables, which as Dungeons & Dragons progressed, they made better tables that included all the monsters from the other books, Monster Manual 2 and the Fiend Folio. One of my favorite sections was encountering a random character party. And it had all of the things you would need to know, including the treasure or magic items that each random character might actually have on them, and that they would, defend themselves with. And it goes all the way up to 10th level monsters. Mind you, there were only so many monsters in the original Monster Manual, and that's all this covered. But then it also has underwater encounters, freshwater, saltwater, things like that. It even has random ethereal and astral encounters, ghosts, gorgons, ifritis, things like that, demons and devils that you can encounter while traveling through the astral or ethereal plane. Then there's a nice section on castle encounters. So you come across a castle, who's there, who runs it, what sort of, system do they have. Then a huge section of random monster encounters for outdoor encounters, which is broken down by the predominant terrain: plains, scrub, forest, rough, broken areas, hills, mountains, and marshes. Also subcategorized between like Arctic and subtropical conditions. What was some of the other ones? Temperate and subtropical. All the different types of areas you might have depending on where it's located on the continent that you're generating, or an island or something like that. It even has random dinosaur encounter tables, waterborne encounters. One of the most famous, of course, is the city or town encounter matrix, with one of the greatest pictures of Dungeons and Dragons lore, Emrakul the Chaotic. Magic user just blasting his way through town. What could be more fun than that, right? And he's probably only using a magic missile there, but maybe it's burning hands. It's hard to say. Looks like the guy down there on the ground fell victim to a burning hand spell, or maybe a fireball. But DAT, I'm not familiar with who that artist was off the top of my head. All kinds of magic item, random tables for, like I said before, magic items that might be equipped or in the possession of the people that you meet. Then here's one of my favorite parts. Appendix D, random generation of creatures from the lower planes. Basically demons and devils, where you could randomly create or just pick and choose the appearance and abilities of random demons and devils or other monsters you want to make up, starting with the appearance, the head adornment, overall visage, ears, eyes, whether they're bipedal, quadruped, general characteristics, skin, things like that, as well as spell-like abilities and other powers you may wish to give to your demons and devils and monsters. Then there's a nice section here which almost doubles. It's hard for you. Let's do it this way. It's basically we referred to it as the experience point table, but it was basically a summary of all the monsters in the monster manual, including things like their name, their size, their THAC0 or 2-hit armor class 0, armor class, hit dice, number of attacks, damage per attack, special attack, special defense, intelligence, and of course the experience point value, including by hit point, etc. for every single monster in the book. And if you knew your monsters and for some reason you didn't happen to have a monster manual handy or you just didn't have one yet, this was invaluable. For many months before I could save up to buy a monster manual, I could use this section and still play D&D without having the monster manual. Unfortunately, it didn't have the treasure type, which would have been nice, but then it would have needed a whole other section. Then here's a fun section for a lot of players back in the day, Appendix F, which was gambling. All kinds of different ways that your players could go into a tavern or a gambling hall and roll some dice and find out if they won or lost at the particular gaming table that they were at. Then we have Appendix G, which is traps. Appendix H, which is tricks, all kinds of things, features, and just crazy things that could happen. Then dungeon dressing, all kinds of descriptive items that you can place throughout your dungeon. Instead of having to figure it out, you could just randomly roll up completely bizarre dungeons with everything from furnishings, religious articles and furnishings, magic user furnishings, general description, containers, clothing and footwear, food and drink, all the kinds of things that you might just find strewn about a dungeon. Appendix J is herbs, spices, and medicinal vegetables, including the plant and or special part of a plant, and the use and or powers. So you could use this to create, medicinal ointments and concoctions, as well as not potions, because that was earlier in the book, but things like that, so that your characters could, possibly come up with a poison neutralizer or an ailment cure of all shapes and sizes. Then there's some cute little appendixes coming up, starting with K, describing magical substances, describing... Oh, it's a very short section, but, it's a powder, what color it is, what's its, consistency, and things like that. And then Appendix L is conjured animals and monsters for the different various, conjuration spells that your player characters may have, and you want to see what they summoned up. And then my absolute favorite appendix of them all is Appendix N, inspirational and educational reading, including all of the books that Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson read and inspired this very game, starting from Paul Anderson and ending with the greatest writer of all time, Roger Zelazny. If you haven't gone through this and read every single book in there, I get it, but I highly recommend all of these books. I have, over the past decades, tried to read each and every one of them, and I still haven't made it through the whole list. there's some books in there when I wikied them or looked them up on Wikipedia or Google, I'm like, yeah, just not really up my alley. There's some books in there that really don't seem to fit, but if it inspired them, then why not give them a chance and see what about that book inspired the two guys who created this wonderful game. An honorable mention would be The Dying Earth. If you haven't read the Dying Earth novels, I really recommend it. Better yet, though, if you could find the audiobooks, there's a couple authors out there that read them, especially the Cudgel stories. Just absolutely wonderful listens. Appendix O is encumbrance of standard items. A lot of items listed here don't exist anywhere else, which is a shame because there are things here that you're going to find or want to buy, and it would have been nice if they had a price value, but it tells you the encumbrance in gold pieces, which for me, I actually insist on using the encumbrance charts and rules because there's really only so much treasure you can carry around and carry out, and the more you carry, the slower you get and the harder it is to fight. Trying to lug around a 50-pound sack of coins while holding a sword and a shield, no, you're going to have to drop it. And then you just gave the monsters more incentive to want to kill you because they either want their treasure back or they want whatever you found, because maybe you defeated a monster in the previous room that was giving them a hard time and they couldn't get that treasure. Now you just made their job easier. Appendix P, creating a party on the spur of the moment. If, again, you need to create, pre-gen characters for a dungeon, here you go. If you want to flesh out a random party that the characters encounter in a dungeon or on the road, here you go. And that ends the appendix. Then there's the glossary, which any good book would have one. And it covers all of the basic words that as a child of 12 to 14, there were a lot of words in there I just did not know. And I found the explanations of them here, including phrases that he, or Gygax used, I should say, vis-a-vis, face-to-face, or compared with. Very, very helpful when you're a youngster and learning the game. Of course, the afterword on page 230, for me, one of the most important parts of the book. And I'm not going to read it again because you guys have heard me read it out loud many, many times. And for me, it was one of the most important parts of making the game, my world, my rules. But as always, fairness was always implied and always something I tried to emulate and provide for my gamers. Obviously, there are rules, and obviously the GM is more or less in control of a lot of things in the game, but without fairness, it's really just a storytelling game with human die rollers. Last but not least is the index. If there was something that you couldn't find, and people are always complaining how poorly this book was put together, well, there's an index. If you're looking for something, check the index. You will find it. And then after the index, of course, there are a few of the more important random tables and things like that. The non-player characters, persona of non-player characters. One of the more widely used charts. The random language determination, height and weight of characters encounter reaction table, the encumbrance of standard items, a little paragraph here on armor, the bulk, the weight, the base movement, standard hireling cost, expert hireling costs, morale failure, loyalty, alignment, etc. All at the end of the book, all vastly important parts of this book. And I really should have gone over it a little bit more in the first video, but I'm glad I didn't, because each of these sections are incredibly helpful for a gamer. Even if you're using another system, I don't know if these charts and tables and sections were, brought forward in other and later editions, but There's so much valuable information in this book. It's literally a must-have, even if you're not playing Dungeons & Dragons. If you're playing Call of Cthulhu or Traveler, there's actually a lot of stuff in here that will help you out. With that said, I am going to end the video. Wish you guys a wonderful weekend and a wonderful holiday week next week for those of you who have the whole week off like we do. And hope you enjoy the heck out of it. Don't eat too much. And, let me know what you thought in the comment section. And you guys all know where to get a hold of me on Discord and Facebook and Instagram, etc. Shadow and Sun. We love you guys. Until then, happy trails.